Okay, so let's continue on our discussion here. So let's talk about the last section here of chapter 12. We've talked about so far about how to create an archive. We've talked about how to copy files between two systems, but really we're only copying a snapshot, right? So like, uh, for example, uh, I don't know if I've had to do this in this class, but I know in another class for some of the assignments on the Microsoft Teams, I've uploaded an assignment. I said, this is the assignment description. This is what I want you to do. The students read it. They look through it. There's some confusion. Sometimes there's typos. Sometimes there's things that I didn't explain clearly. So what do? I go and I make a change. I make a change to the document. Right. Well, the document's on my computer, and in order to make the assignment, I have to upload it to Microsoft Teams. Well, the problem is that when I go to make a change on my local computer, it doesn't get changed in Microsoft Teams, so I have to upload the file again. And unfortunately, the way that Teams works is it creates a new copy of the file instead of just overwriting the existing one, which is fine, I guess. But the thing that bothers me is that I wish that it would be just a matter of, hey, I can make a change on my local machine and it's synchronized. That's what I would love. I would love it to be able to just synchronize to update the version that's in Teams every time I make a change on my local version. Okay, so somewhat like I mean, most of you probably use Google Drive or Dropbox or other or maybe GitHub. No, your GitHub it has to be automatically synced as well. But anyway, so OneDrive on Microsoft, it's OneDrive. These are all versions of these cloud-based storage systems where the file exists out there somewhere, but when a change happens in one location, it's automatically synchronized with the other locations where that file exists as well. So here for what we're going to talk about is the Rsync tool is a way to be able to um, um, synchronize the files between two systems. So rsync, if we keep it running, then what would happen is if we run it over and over, then it synchronizes only the differences. So instead of having to copy the whole new file the way that SCP would, rsync just has to copy the differences, just has to say, oh, that file changed, so I'm going to copy the differences between the two. Okay. uh, let's see. Yeah, so rsync is our command that we're going to be able to use to do that. We can use the -n option to be able to do what's called a dry run. So it doesn't make any changes, but it just says this is what's going to happen if you were to run this command without the -n, then this is what would happen. Okay. So especially when we're copying or syncing important system files or other important files that we don't want to lose on the remote system, then we do a dry run first to see what's going to happen. Okay. All right. So again, -v, just like before, verbosity. So basically tells us what all the stuff that happens is, and the -a can be able to have all these other options as well. It'll enable all the following options. Okay. So synchronize the whole directory tree. So not only the recursive option synchronizes everything, not just the folder or that we're currently looking at. Symbolic links, we'll talk about that. Preserve permissions, again, the same thing as before. Instead of using the default permissions, we use the same permissions that are the source file. Timestamp, so when the files were created. Wouldn't this be nice for some of you when you're submitting assignments? Because I know that some of you have submitted late, but you say, well, I clicked on it, and then this, you can see when the file was created, but actually whenever it sends us the file, it just creates a new timestamp based on when the file gets uploaded to the server. All right, some of this other stuff: preserve group ownership and the owner, and synchronizing device files. Okay, so let's see some examples here. Okay, now basically, one of the things that we're basically going to use rsync for is to synchronize two folders. So with two local folders, so not across network or anything. Okay, so the var log directory gets a synchronized copy in the temp folder. Okay. So now the log directory and its content, everything inside of it, is created in the temp folder. All right. Of all the contents that are in here, copy of it gets put over here and it gets synchronized. Okay. If we only want to synchronize the content of a specific folder without creating the folder itself, so if we don't want to create a log folder inside of temp, we just want to take all the files and folders inside of log and we want to put them inside of temp, then we let's see, trying to see what's the difference here. Oh, trailing slash, sorry, trailing slash here. So this slash on the log here. Yep, that's it. The trailing slash says, don't create the log folder, only create the stuff inside of the log folder. Yeah. These slashes are very important, right? These slashes and how they're used, that's why we talked about in the compressing archives, that first slash gets removed. All right. Okay. All right. So what if we want to synchronize across the network? Okay. Well, we can use that same rsync command. Now we want to take this var log folder and we want to put it into a remote location in a temp directory. Okay. So in the same way, we can take the remote folder from somewhere else and we can synchronize it to a local temp directory. Okay. And again, what this is doing is it's copying the stuff. It's copying the stuff inside of log over into temp. In this particular example, it's also copying the log folder itself into temp, and it's only copying. It's only updating the differences. Okay. All right. So if there's no differences, it doesn't do anything. If all of the files on the local and the files on the remote are all the same timestamp, same content, same everything, then it just doesn't do anything. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's how the rsync works. Okay. And we can do a version of this through the local. So I can go through some of these examples using the local. Okay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pull up my virtual machine. Okay. And we are going to go through some of these practice sessions here on chapter 12. Okay. All right. So if we go back to that first practice session. Okay. What I want to do is, okay, so we're not going to do a in the first part of that practice session. It says to go to SSH to root server X. We're not going to be able to do that, so we're just going to use the local here. Okay, and what we want to do is, okay, let's see here. I'm gonna su into root. I want to go ahead and just run this as root. I meant to be in the home directory. Okay, so we want to first just talk through about how we do the tar, just basic tar. Okay, we're going to do a basic archive. Okay, so we're going to do the first example there, not the practice, but the first example from the text itself, which was to take tar cf. Remember, C is to create, F is file, so root/etc. tar. So this is the file that we're creating, and we want to use the etc directory as the source information. Okay. Notice it removed that leading slash from member names, right? So now if we said, okay, show me what's inside of that. So what was that? How do we show? Somebody say T, right? T for list the contents, all right? And what do we want to show? We want to show the root etc tar. So notice this is all the contents of that etc tar directory, all right? A lot of stuff. Well, and notice it all starts with etc, and the reason why is because we compressed the etc directory, right? So we took the etc directory and everything inside of it, and we compressed it into a tar file. Okay, and the etc tar file, it works just like anything. It works like just like any file. I can remove it. I can, yeah. I mean, it works like any file. So I can remove it, remove that. Yep. And so now it doesn't exist anymore. So let me do this though. Let me do ls because, yeah. Let me create a directory. Okay. Okay. So now I'm in the archive file because what I want to do with this is I want to create a few different archives in this folder. I'm going to create a few different tar files in this folder, and I want to show how using the different types of tar commands are going to create different types of files. So let's do this. Let's tar. Tar. Okay, so we're going to create an etc.tar file here, and I want to put the etc stuff in there. Sorry, I need to create a file. Okay, so this just creates using the tar command. All right, but there were other ways that we could do this, right? There were other ways we could do tar commands, right? We could do tar with a czf, right? And what should the file extension be? Do you remember? Z, right? Okay. Okay. So now we created the gzip version of this. There was another one, right? There was the lowercase j, and this was bz2, right? bz2, right? Because that's the bzip2 format. Right, so if we do that, I'm going to create that. Okay, and you'll see why I'm doing this in just a moment. Because I also want to do one more. I want to do the capital J. And this was the XZ format. So these are all the different types of the archives that we can create. The baseline one, the gzip, the bzip2, and the xz. And as soon as this is done, no, this is taking a while, right? The xz format is taking quite a while to execute. Wow, that took a while. Okay, so if we do an ls, we see, okay, these are all our tar files. But what I want to do is I want to do an ls-l. And the reason why is I want you to see something. I want you to see, look at this, look at the different sizes. All right. So these all compressed. All right. These all compressed the files, but man, that's a much larger file than the others, right? So what we would like is probably this one, right? The last one down here, the smallest file that was created. It would probably be the one that we would like to see, right? Because it's the smallest, it's going to be the easiest to move from one location to another. It's going to take the shortest amount of time to move from one location to another. But also notice that it was the longest one that in terms of the time to actually create the archive, right? So there was a trade-off there, right? It took a long time to create the archive. It will probably take a long time to extract the archive as well, right? But it will take the shortest amount of time to move it from one location to another. And if we look at these, this one was the biggest one. I don't remember, I didn't time it, but I would imagine that it took the shortest amount of time to compress. It would probably take the shortest amount of time to extract, but it's going to take a lot longer to move it from one location on the network to another. Okay, and so that's the trade-off. That's what the trade-off is, or at least one of the trade-offs that we have to look at in which compression algorithm to use. There's also some security features for each algorithm that's beyond the scope of this class, but those would also come into play as well. Okay. One thing I do want to look at, let's see. Let's see. That's not what I want to do. I wanted to see what's the what is the Etsy size? Didn't see. Just trying to see what kind of compression we got with each of those algorithms. I'll have to look at it later. Let's see. I want to try to find a file that might do some interesting stuff whenever it gets extracted. Let's see. Okay, the TCSD config file. Let's take a note of that one, the TCSD, because that one has an interesting permissions situation. Okay, so let's take a look at, where are we? Yeah. Let's see. I want to show. Let me first show. Let me. Great. Okay, so we can show what's inside of the tar file. Now, what would happen, do you think, if we did the TF command, but we did it on a different type? Right, so we don't put the Z option in there. We just do this. It still shows it, right? But to be sure, we do want to go ahead and use the correct options for that, right? All right. Now we wanted to say, what was it that we said we wanted to keep note of was the TCSD, I think it was. So let's extract. Let's just use the GZ file. Okay. Okay. So now we have an Etsy folder in here. Okay. What file was it we were looking at? The TCSD config. Oh, that's interesting. It maintained. All these things maintained their permissions, but we didn't use the permission option. Huh. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that it says that it should have maintained the permissions, right? Isn't that what the text said? Does it maintain the permissions, or does it not? Because I thought it used the default permissions. What do you guys think? I gave you guys a little trick question there, because it's not that the UMass, it's not that the permissions, it's not the mission permissions become whatever the default is. It's that the UMask gets subtracted from there. So basically what happens is I'm logged in as root, my UMask is 22, which means that it's going to subtract the permissions right from both the group and the other. So any file that originally had, or any any file that originally had write permissions, any file or folder that originally had write permissions would have them removed. And I think we see that actually. Let me see. Let me do a new terminal window because I want to show you this. Okay, so I'm going to log in. So I need to. This. So what I want to do is ls-l/etc. Okay. So let's look for something that has write permissions. Not one of these. These are what's called soft links. We'll talk about that in a future class. Let's see if there's anything in here that has write permission for group or other. I'm not seeing anything, guys. So we may have to do something else to show how this works. I don't see anything with write permission for group or other that we could compare. Okay, let's do this way. Let me I shouldn't have done this. I did that wrong. Let me just do it this way. Let me UMask. What I want to do. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do it that way. I'm going to extract this. Okay. I guess it doesn't do it as a temporary. It doesn't do it via temporary, does it? I'm trying to think of an example of how I can do this. Because what I want to do is I want to show you that these permissions get changed when we do this extraction. Okay, I can't. I'm having difficulty thinking of an example, and I'm running out of time. So I'll try to think of an example of how I can do that. So that's the practice. That's basically the gist of what I wanted to show you from the practice of section 1, right? Of how to create that, tar, how to Yeah, how to create the tar, how to extract it, how to view the contents. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the synchronizing two files, two folders, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to section 3. Okay, and what I'm going to do is go back up to this home directory for root. I'm going to make a directory called server logs. Okay. Now, instead of going across the server, I'm just going to do the rsync here for the local version. Okay, -av, and instead of root at server 1 as they show in the example, I'm just going to use the local var log, and I'm going to put it into, and also instead of putting it on the root directory server logs, I'm just going to make a local version here in my home directory. Okay. All right. So basically it copied it into there. So let's see. Copied it into server logs. So there's a log folder here that was created because that was the folder, right? So if I look at what's in log here, it's all these files here. Okay, so the log folder was created because I didn't put that trailing slash, right? So I created a log folder that had everything inside of the log folder. Okay. All right. So now we're going to run logger log files. Okay. Now what just happened was that we logged an event. Okay, so we added something to that log. Now let's see. Let's see, what is it that we want to? Okay, so now let's run that rsync command again. Okay. All right. And is it the same list? No, it's the same thing. I don't know if it should have been. Ah. Notice here, when we run it again, immediately, much less information is transferred, right? Sent this many bytes, received so many bytes, much less information is transferred, right? If we do it again, same thing, right? The reason why this happened, the reason why not as much information is because there's not a change, right? If we log something, notice that the only information that changed was this, log messages. Let's take a look at that, okay? Let's take a look at ls-l. Okay. Notice it was changed December 18th at 2:47. Well, you know, it's back Eastern time. But let's take a look at what ls-l, instead of log messages, let's look at var log messages. Notice it was changed more recently, right? So if we were to synchronize this again, let's see, change to 254. Change it to 247. Let's do that logger command again. Okay. Now let's see. 247 is our local. 256, right, is our change. Notice here before we did the logger command, right? This was a smaller size than this. Why? Because if we look at tail dash 10 var log messages, all right? Notice the last couple of lines are what we logged. Notice that if we do the same thing, instead of doing the tail, let's do tail 3. Okay, so if we just look at the last 3 lines here, if we do the same thing on our local version, right, it's not the same. It should at least have the same 2. Okay, so we synchronized this log messages thing. So now if we tail that, those messages should still be there. That's interesting. Those should be the same though. Wonder if something's up with my rsync. I wonder if because it's a local thing if it's having issues. That is very strange. Oh, I know what's going on. I'm inside of the server logs folder and I'm copying it. Arrgh. Oh man, watch. Look, I created a server logs folder in here. Oh man. Don't I feel silly? Okay. Let's go inside. Let's take a look inside of server logs. There's log, yep. Let's take a look at what is on the tail of, instead of log, yeah. There we go. That's what we were looking for. Arrgh. Okay. Okay, we got a couple of minutes. Let's start over. Let's do it like this. Let's see. Forget it. Let's do. Let's go up one more. Actually, let's do it. We're inside of. Where are we? What I want to show you is I know what I can do. Okay. I want to sync that. Okay, now that's all gone. That's all there. Okay, so now there's inside of a folder called server logs. Okay, so now I'm inside of server logs. Now I want to go to log, and okay, now I want to tail -n -5. Those are the last 5 of messages. Come on. Okay. Okay, so there's a later message as well here. Okay. So now if we say, okay, compare that to tailing var log messages, right? It's the same, right? This and this are the same. We can see that now. Okay. So now if I log, if I do the logger command, let me do a different messages. Let me do a different message. Okay, so I'm going to log a different message now. If it ever works. Okay, now I'm going to do an ls-l on 2 different things. One is the messages file. Okay, so we see that it is at 3 o'clock on December 18th, and it's this thing here. Now I'll do the same thing on var log messages. Okay, now it's not the same, and it's not at the same time. There must have been some new message that was added to their. Oh, you know what the new message was? It was different message, right? So if we were to tail var log messages, we see a different message was logged, right? But if we did the same thing to just messages on our local, right? Oh, it doesn't appear there, right? Because we haven't synced it yet. So now if we do an rsync, right? So now messages is synced. Now if we look at the 2 files and their sizes, what happens? They are the same size now. Okay, now this is what we're expecting to see. And if we do the messages at the end, yep, that's there. And if we look at the last 5 of our var log messages, it's the same as well. Okay, so now they're synced, right? And so basically, what the way that at a basic level, the way that Google Drive, that if you connect it to a folder on your local machine, the Dropbox, anything like that, the way that it works is that there's a background process that's constantly running this rsync, every few seconds, every so often, it's running this like rsync command to keep the files up to date. Okay, it checks for differences and then it syncs them. Okay, some version of this is what's going on with your Google Drive or your Dropbox or your OneDrive. Okay. All right. So like I said, we will end there for today. I feel like we've given you guys enough new information. Again, we will not have a live lecture next week on Friday. So I may record something and upload it, or I may just let you guys have chapter 13 to read on your own. But then we will pick up again after the new year on January 8th, and we will we'll pick up there, and we will pick up there with chapter 14. Okay. All right. If there aren't any questions, then we'll end there for today. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Stay inside. Obey the curfew, and let's get through this pandemic together. Okay. Have a good weekend, guys.